I will welcome you all. I am Jane Harf. I am the Executive Director of Green Energy Ohio, and we are so excited today to have so much interest in this particular topic of agrivoltaics. I heard one of our panelists, Dan French, speak at an Ohio Power Siting Board hearing, and I was fascinated and knew that this was something that we needed to explore further, not only in Ohio, but globally, which is what we're going to do today. And then also find ways to continue to learn more about it and to promote it. So I am going to focus on admitting our guests, and I'm going to let Tony Logan, who is our moderator for today, I'm going to let him take over.
Okay. Thank you, Jane Harf, and special thanks to Green Energy Ohio for showcasing this kind of revolutionary new scientific discipline called agrivoltaics. And what is agrivoltaics? It's the place where farming and solar energy come together, creating a synergy which can be beneficial both to the generation of solar energy from the solar panels above and to the operation of compatible agricultural practices below the panels. And enhanced soil health and soil carbon sequestration are also additional welcome benefits. As a longtime GEO member and today's moderator, I'm gratified to have with us two really national and, in Dan's case, global experts on this new and cutting edge science of agrivoltaics. Dan French and Sarah Moser. Dan and Sarah will brief us on their activities from a state, national, and international perspective. And looking at our participants today, we have a really strong mixture of state and local policymakers, farmers and landowners, solar developers, and renewable energy advocates. So let me get things started by turning the screen over to Dan French. Dan, the screen is yours.
Thank you, Tony. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
And can everybody see my screen okay? Is that a yes? Good to go. Can everybody see the happy cow? Okay, good. Thank you, Sarah.
Happy.
Great, thanks. I really appreciate the invitation. Grateful for all of your time at this kind of turn of the tide, so to speak. I call it a renaissance. I'm going to get to that. But thank you, Jane. Thank you, Tony. Thank you, GEO. The future is bright. I'm going to try to make that case. My bio isn't important except to say I was an attorney. I did go overseas and get a master's of law. I've worked with very large multinationals. I've been in energy a long time. I was in-house at BP. But I love America. I'm really a patriot. I'm a bipartisan guy. I take calls from both sides of the aisle. I don't do a lot of things in public. I'm a very substantive guy. I'm a brownfielder. I've focused a lot of my career, working on our toughest, polluted, most dirtiest, what do we do with it, real estate, and working backwards. So kind of have an engineer's perspective. I grew up in downstate Illinois, bouncing around a lot of rural communities, working on farms, living next to farms, having family on farms. And so this means a lot to me, and I hope you'll see all the reasons why. So I have nothing to sell you today, although I am also the executive producer of the Solar Farm Summit, and I hope to see you there next to O'Hare Airport in Chicagoland next year. We just had a sellout show. But the future is bright. The future is now. This is the main point I want to leave you with. There's our website again, and our lovely logo, which folks love. Agrivoltaics is happening. Thank you, Tony, for kind of giving us a basic definition. Here's matcha and mustard greens in Japan, where they've gotten a big head start. And I love this article. Y'all should go find this. Throwing shade is solar energy's new superpower. It's on Bloomberg from a while ago, making great arguments about how there are genuine bottom line value add to these practices. It's really about shade, the superpower of shade and the evapotranspiration. I'm not a horticulturalist or botanist, but I've discovered in my quest here that most plants are only using about half of the day's light. And then they're sweating the rest of the day. They're stressed the rest of the day. And while that's happening, they can't grow or produce fruit or vegetables. And so many plants actually thrive in the shade. And we'll see some of that as we go. There's a lot of great work that's already happening. I'll shout out some of the logos at the bottom. This graphic came from Sandbox Solar and Spade in a collaboration between these folks. And Spade is an agrivoltaics app that you can play with and tinker, as farmers like to do. This is really the secret sauce, how we're solving for abundance, how we're answering the big question of how we're going to feed and power the next billion mouths and hands to come as we push to 9 and then 10 billion. We're already past 8 billion now, holy cow. We're gonna need more food, more energy, but we have limited water, we have limited resources. The earth is a sphere and spheres are finite. And we have to work on the nexus of these three things. This has been the key to civilization since it began. 30% of our energy use is in agriculture, 70% of our water use is in agriculture. And we're gonna need 10 million acres for renewables to hit our goals by 2050. So how can we do all this? Seems like a challenge, but I wanna start with some of the bottom line reasons why the economics are taking over. This is a local example in Ohio. Oberlin College is saving a fortune by using sheep instead of lawnmowers. Forget about the gas, forget about all those other reasons why, the carbon sequestration, soil breathing, as Tony mentioned, all the ecological reasons. Bottom line, this stuff pencils. So there it is, 2.3 megawatt Old Slate Solar Farm, Knox County, Ohio. Check it out. So again, the future is now. This is the installation base in the United States as it is currently. All this work to get to this point, and now look at California and Texas. It's really taking over. If you're following headline news at all, you've seen a lot of headlines about solar prices plummeting. Solar is the cheapest form of electricity now. There's more investment in solar than any other form of electricity. And maybe very soon, thanks to the manufacturing boom, solar produced domestically will be able to outcompete foreign competition. And you can see all of the curves scaling exponentially like we like to see. It's in the pipeline. And so here it is, we can see it again. Solar is really taking over the new installed base. It's dominating investment, money flows like water, and it's flowing to solar. The future is right now. Again, the reasons are economic. We're really smart. We keep figuring out how to make things cheaper. And this is the reason why solar prices, basically over my life, began in the 1970s, over $100 a watt, and now it's pennies a watt. We've adjusted for inflation here. There's been a tariff war with China in varying stages over the last 10 years, reached a peak. And the pandemic didn't help with supply chain issues. We did have price inflation recently, but they're coming down again. Solar prices are actually falling faster than a basket of other commodities. And the United States has abundant solar resources. It's happening in Germany, it's happening in Nordic countries, which are at much higher latitudes than the United States. Basically, the entire lower 48 is very suitable for solar. And of course, in the Southwest, we have extremely excellent solar resources. Quick look at wind too, just wind is happening. Particularly next door to Ohio and Indiana and Illinois, it really starts. You can see some big wind farms going in, and I just flashed that because America is exceptional from a natural resources perspective, as well as land quality. This is a quick look, planetary land quality. We have the biggest patch of the best dirt in one place in the whole world, and we're putting almost all of it to use. It's intersected by the largest inland waterway network, which is the cheapest form of transit by an order of magnitude, something the rest of the world simply doesn't have. But you might be asking now, oh, aren't all these things in the same place? The solar, the wind, the best farmland. It is. Let's look at it. Here's a view from our friends at Bloomberg. Again, this is in that shade is a superpower article from Bloomberg with some annotations here. This is all US land. Each one of the squares is 1 million acres. You can see a lot of forest land in the east, a lot of rangeland in the west, a lot of cropland in the middle. We've got about 3.8 million square miles of land, about 2.5 billion acres, and about 900 million acres of that is in some form of agricultural production. Here's kind of another look at it of agricultural production. What are we, of our land use and what is doing what? And I just want to draw your attention quickly to the food that we actually eat hovering over Ohio, magically. Is only about 77.3 million acres. That's the stuff that humans consume. Here's kind of another look at it. It's Indiana, Illinois, and a piece of Iowa put together. This is the stuff that we're actually eating that we produce here in the United States. We still do import things from Mexico and other places. But there's a good look. But again, according to what we need, where we want to get projection-wise by 2050, our installed solar base, we need, and it kind of depends on who you talk to, maybe less, maybe more, but I would say less than 10 million acres. And so does NREL, where this number came from. That's only 0.5% of all US land. And again, reference the 77 million acres of land producing the food we eat. And here's another kind of look at it relative to other land uses in the United States, the size of the built environment, previously disturbed lands, even brownfields and contaminated lands, which I'm a big fan of, by the way. They call that bright field redevelopment. I would encourage everyone to pop up to EPA's big brownfield show in Detroit in August. There'll be many solar sessions, a record number of solar sessions, and I do think we have to go get every landfill because they can't do anything else. But again, you can just, for perspective, we have an embarrassment, an abundance of land in the United States, in North America, particularly relative to the rest of the world. You know, they have 100 million more people in the EU, but 1/3 less land. And here's another kind of look at our cropland, crop and production in recent years. And we're kind of zooming into the top of the chart here. So it's, you know, 350, 360 total million acres that we're tracking. And a lot of it, you know, 20 million, 30 million acres is actually already in conservation. And increasingly, we do have increasing prevented plants. So that's natural events, crops that should have been planted that weren't. And again, playing within, keep that 10 million number in mind when we're thinking about what we need to go get, preserve and conserve, maybe with solar energy. So finally getting to an actual definition of agrivoltaics, which again, I'm grateful Tony gave you one at the top because I've buried the headline, but this is from NREL. This is how they're thinking about it. It's very simple. Agricultural activities performed underneath and around solar arrays. Boom. Crops, grazing, pollinator habitat, apiaries, which you can do. We'll get a look at that. And even solar greenhouses. We think about it as crops, critters, and conservation. Those are the three buckets. The combination of photovoltaic and photosynthetic processes into a single synergized system. It's all kind of working together and intended and actively managed as such. And I'm going to dive into that a little bit more. Our European friends, again, they don't have as much land, and they don't fit conservation, wildflowers, restored prairie, restored meadow, those types of things into agriculture, into agrivoltaics, but that's them. We'll talk about that. Here's some just looks at it, right? We can do it conventionally with these traditional utility scale configurations, and it's happening already, particularly sheep. You know, the sheep, they're gentle and they fit right under there. The first generation solar projects, they might be 2 feet off the ground, 36 inches off the ground, and the sheep can nibble in there pretty well. But we're starting to figure out some of these new configurations. Can we space the panels? Can we go vertical with the panels? And all of those kinds of things. We're going to look at that. Here's another look. Also, actually, what are the modules? Are they completely is there 0% transparency? Can we do some pass through? And how does all that pencil? There's a kind of a cornucopia of abundance and research and innovation that's happening at this scale. Here's some more research. This is just, again, the very simple kind of what we think about, simple solar. It doesn't move, no tracking. There's kind of 3 zones and they get more or less shaded. This panel's just sitting there and the sun is moving across. But there's already been this research that's been done to show kind of what bed gets what sunlight characteristics and what's the water environment and what will grow better in these beds. But we can put it on single axis trackers, which are getting cheaper and cheaper. And we can track with the sun and more evenly distribute that energy. So I got a big shout out to NREL again, who's really leading the charge on this and their Inspire project. There's a lot of things that you can find. This is one of their graphics. They kind of have this 5 C's of agrivoltaic success. You can Google for that. I'm leaving a lot of breadcrumbs as I blast through all this. So I hope you'll refer back later and pass this on to friends. There's a tremendous amount of incredible intellectual activity that's happening in this space. And we've been going for actually several decades. It's kind of sneaking up on us and scaling quickly, but do check out NREL's work. Also through DOE and a lot of the good folks at NREL, they have this Inspire research project. I don't have time to go into all this, but there you can get a quick look at a lot of the public and private sector partners that are coming together, and a quick dot on the map of all the different kinds of projects that are experimenting in America's many different growing environs. Here's a closer look at the map. Again, you can go find this. I was asked today to focus globally, and I will do that, but I must mention these things as we're digging in and scaling now here in the United States. And this is some of the best work that's being done anywhere in the world. Beautiful, beautiful projects, bees, butterfly oases, and agricultural production under the panels. You can go find this Inspire map and track hundreds of projects. You can see the conservation bucket clustering here in the greater Great Lakes region. Illinois has busted into the front with, I think, approaching 200 pollinator projects, thanks to their pro-pollinator policy and their CEJA law, I believe it's called. But you can go find that map, and it's updated all the time. They're tracking 314 sites as of, this is a little dated now, actually. So you can find the fresh update if you go look now. Actually, wait till after this webinar. But here's another quick look at the data. Smaller sites, a lot of pilot projects, but as it is in Japan, there's over 2,000 or 3,000, approaching maybe 3,000 projects in Japan. They're all very small. Again, Japan's an incredibly land scarce country, and there's a lot of just half acre, 1 acre, 2 acre, 3 acre plots that are happening. But I have to tell you about just a couple projects in the United States, including my favorite project. It just happens to be at the biosphere, which you lit my childhood imagination alive, like, oh, we can do amazing things under glass. Kind of turned out to be a bust, but we learned a lot along the way. And Agrivoltaics is restoring kind of the inspirational spirit of biosphere with this incredible University of Arizona project led by Greg Barron-Gafford. One of the trailblazers in this space. I recommend his own website there at the bottom, barrongafford.org/agrivoltaics, definitely leading the way. And this paper in Nature Sustainability back in 2019, you'll see why it's some of my favorite stuff. So the energy benefits, we're talking about not cooling by 9 degrees Celsius under the panels. And cooling the panels so they had a 2% performance increase. So 9 degrees Celsius, that's over 20 degrees Fahrenheit. The food benefits, they actually tripled pepper production under the panels. They doubled tomato production under the panels, and the jalapeno peppers were kind of a wash. But the water benefits were extremely compelling and promising. The tomatoes only needed 30% less water while they doubled yields, and the peppers needed half as much water as they tripled yields. And you can get a quick look at the soil moisture deltas in the right-hand side, but I encourage you, if you're interested, to dive into this rabbit hole of research. It is my favorite. Here's another look at the yields. When we're thinking about solving for abundance on a hotter, feistier planet, agrivoltaics seems to be like a pretty good adaptable solution to not just hold the line, but to increase production. So it really is this energy, food, water nexus. And you can see this nice graphic from Uncle Sam, bundling kind of these things together. I mentioned crops, critters, and conservation, but biodiversity, regulating services, or ecosystem services is a pretty big component and a pretty large basket of solutions when we're staring at the problem set in these buckets of energy, food, and water, all of which we don't have enough of. This is a graphic from Monarch Vegetation Services, which is partnered there with Ernst Seeds. Kind of painting a quick picture of how we can restore the prairie, how solar is actually a conservation play, and we can go restore the prairie and let the soil breathe and let those deep roots sink. We've tore up a lot of prairie. I'm from downstate Illinois, as I mentioned, and I don't have to tell folks in the Midwest, you know, we tore up a lot of the old grasslands, and they're gone, except for maybe along some highways and obviously the conserved land and cemeteries. Actually, a lot of wildflower species have hidden in cemeteries. And we can solar can pay to start bringing some of those back and capture stormwater and all the other things, in addition to providing all the additional ecosystem services, but the habitat for the bees, the bugs, the bunnies, butterflies, bambies, birds. And again, the market's here now. I have nothing to sell you. I don't work for Ernst Seeds, but they partnered with the American Solar Grazing Association, ASGA. They have this Fuzz and Buzz seed mix. It's ready to go. You can order it now if you want to get into it. So we've already thought a lot about this. Does it work? Yes, it works. The economics work. Again, the environmental functionality is compelling. Here's a study from Be the Change. If you build it, they will come. Very recent study out of the UK where they are doing some solar for conservation. You can find this study just from May, and you can see the incredible functionality on the screen. They're functioning as wildlife havens, and the avians love them and they flock to them, pun intended. And this particular species of concern, linnets, were found on over 50% of the sites that they surveyed, all quite intentionally, to build the habitat, and they will come. Over in Indiana, one of the biggest pollinator-friendly projects just flipped on the switch, 150 plus megawatts, light source PP just east of Indianapolis. One of the first PV plus apiary projects was out in Oregon. That you can see the safety conscious person on the left and the wild man on the right. That's John Jacob, actually, with Old Soul Apiaries, a real bee man out on the West Coast, and did one of the first PV plus apiary projects in the United States, and they're doing more now in Minnesota as well. PV honey, that's from Connexus Energy. So Fraunhofer really broke the ground on this. Again, all puns intended during my remarks. Back in 1982, they had the bright idea. Can we combine uses? Dual use solar is another name or definition, I guess, for agrivoltaics. And so you can do one or the other, which is what the top graphic kind of shows. Or if you put them together, you're going to take a slight hit. Maybe, unless you can increase production, as they did here with the potatoes, and pretty much double the harvest. So that's what we're talking about here, doubling the harvest. And they're working on wheat now. Again, you can do either or you can get 160% production per hectare. But can you actually use today's modern equipment to do proper crops under solar panels? Yes, you can. You need more steel, but here's again, Germany leading the way. But hey, they're in Germany, but I see a John Deere tractor. All right, whip around the world. Again, Japan leading the way. They're also doing wheat. Wheat ready for harvest. This is from Notice. They're not using a John Deere tractor, unfortunately. PV mushrooms in Miyagi Prefecture, there it is. PV mushrooms. And sweet potatoes, again from Notice. Does it work? Do they grow in the shade? Sweet potatoes love the shade. Shade plants absolutely thrive. There they are harvesting. Lettuce in Japan. You'll be surprised how many things do well in the shade. And what about hay? And what about those vertical panels? Can we do solar fences? Yes, we can. Somebody, will they be, I don't know, barbed wire fencing was a revolution in the West. Will solar fences be a revolution? Maybe. A renaissance? What about apples? Yes. This is next to Sun, Germany. Fraunhofer again was in on this project, and you can notice the panels, slightly more spaced, but they conserve water. They do better in a dry year. Here's one of the biggest agrivoltaics projects in the world, the biggest one in Europe, 660 megawatts back in 2021, doing a lot of veggies there in Serbia. This is an awesome project, BayWa. If you don't know BayWa, one of the biggest, one of the best, one of the oldest European agribusinesses, and they're getting very excited about agrivoltaics, a lot of work in Europe, and they do have a growing American presence, but they're doing a lot of fruit. If you're not in the fruit business, you know, you're tunneling, you're netting, you're bagging every year. And so there's higher upfront costs maybe with building an agrivoltaics trellis, but probably longer term savings. And of course, you can see the temperature difference here on this particular project, 10 degrees Celsius cooler under the panels. So that microclimate is extremely powerful, both environmentally, economically, and environmentally. It's saving crops. Here's another BayWa project in the Netherlands where I lived and worked. You might lose a berry crop every 5th or 6th year. I forget if it was this project or not, but I think it was a university project. Berries are sensitive. The wrong weather at the wrong time will kill a crop. But at a pilot that's been going for 5 or 6 years, they haven't lost a crop yet. And so that type of resilience makes bottom line difference right there. Forget about the electrons. Here's just another look at this raspberry farm under the panels, and a wider shot fits right in. It's beautiful. Pears in Flanders. Raspberries and strawberries in Switzerland. Notice the transparent panels. They're going big in asparagus in France. And also grapes in France. Now they take wine very seriously in France, and they're not going to put anything over the grapes that would harm them. But these folks are actually improving the wine. They're shading, it's variable shade. And so they're optimizing for the vines and giving them idyllic or more ideal conditions than they would get otherwise. And in Italy, it's saving citron because the planet is warming, the zones are moving north, and the citron business has gotten very hard. It's hard to grow marketable produce in southern Italy. But these incredible guys, again, a recent article from this year, I encourage you to find this from the BBC and read about these trailblazers who are saving citron in southern Italy, an ancient fruit. They take olives seriously in Italy, but there it is. And in Israel, another dry land environment, you can see olives from our friends at Solar Geek. They're doing tomatoes as well. You saw the doubling of tomato production, and where water is scarce, doubling tomato production, but using half as much water is a value proposition that is hard to ignore. Solar Edge has a lot of technology. Solar Edge and Solar Geek are actually working together to scale massively in Israel, which is really leading the way with its innovation. They're already doing roses in Iran. So cut flowers, there's a lot of greenhouses in the Netherlands if you've never been. And they pushed it up to, they just refit. This is a brownfield redevelopment, if you want to think about that, previous adaptive reuse, and they could cover almost 20% of the roof without impacting production. Pivoting to Asia, there's a beautiful shot at some vanilla and pumpkins. Another shot at the pumpkins. Bigger shot in Taiwan. And then in China, where they import 80% of their food. The vast majority of China is a desert. Over 75% of China's dry land or desert conditions. And they're going big on solar to combat desertification, which is on the march. It's been on the march. They've been trying to plant trees. They often die. If you see folks wearing masks in Western China, it's not just the pollution, it's typically the dust. And so they've really been leading the way in terms of scaling agrivoltaics, seizing onto it as a solution. There you can get a good look. They need to unleash the power of shade, and it is working. And so they're starting to build some of the biggest agrivoltaic. They need a lot of solar too. They're importing 80% of their energy, a lot of it from the Middle East still. And so they need the clean energy as well, which is why they're pushing as hard as they are. Not just selling us those panels, they're installing it themselves. Because again, this food, energy, water nexus is the key to life, the key to civilization, and certainly even geopolitics going forward. When this relationship starts to break down, we start to have a lot of trouble. We need these solutions. Agrivoltaics, as simple as it is, it's just shade. It's shade that pays, it's shade that protects, it's a shield against too much sunlight and too much evaporation, and it really does bundle all of these functions together. The ecosystem services, that conservation, but all the agricultural, environmental, ecological, and economic, and the energy all in one thing. It's kind of compelling.
Thank you. Can I hate to cut you off, Dan, but we've got so much. We've got Sarah to talk.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Let me quit. I'll come back. I lost track of time. It's bottom of the hour. I was done anyway. That was it. I had a conclusion.
Jane. Hey, Jane. Am I active? If you can hear me, folks that are listening in, if you have questions for Dan or for Sarah, please feel free to enter your questions into the chat, and Jane will go through them towards the end of the presentation. And thanks again, Dan. It's a very compelling picture of the potential for agrivoltaics internationally. Thank you so much.
And I also want to point out, if I could, that this is being recorded and it will be posted on the Green Energy Ohio website. And Dan, if you would be so kind as to share your slide deck, not just in the presentation, but perhaps separate from, and we can post that as well so people can, there was so much great information in there. And I appreciate your going through it quickly, but I'd like to give people a chance to.
Yep, lost track of time. And there's just a reference slide I had, but I'll put that in the end. No worries. My apologies. I get excited.
No, it's fine. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Jane. Our next speaker is Sarah Mosier, and Sarah's Director of Agrivoltaics with Savillon Solar. Sarah also farms with her family in Van Wert County, I believe it is, and has a background in economic development in Van Wert County, and kind of understands the interrelations between solar and rural economic development. So Sarah, kind of give us a bit of your background and we'll get into the more serious questions.
Thanks, Tony. Yeah, I was very excited listening to Dan. Thank you so much. That's so much information. I'm glad I did not prepare slides. As I'm sitting here listening to all this, I guess my thought is why isn't everyone doing it, right? Like it looks like such a great story. It looks like, you know, it's a no-brainer really. And as Tony mentioned, I'm a farmer. Sometimes the hardest thing to convince farmers is that we have to do or try something new. I farm with my dad, and I think any farmer will tell you that the next generation always has a hard time convincing the old man, you know, to try something new with a tractor or a seeding plan. In fact, you know, hybrids, when they started a while back, the farmers didn't want to plant them. So, you know, how did the industry get around that? Bayer gave seeds to the kids, and the kids planted a plot in the backyard. And when their corn outgrew daddy's corn, he realized, hey, maybe I need to try out the hybrids as well. And now you see that all the time. So, you know, the farmers are getting the message. I had a trip out to John Deere where we were talking about agrivoltaics and the equipment needed for it. And one of the gentlemen brought up the concept that, hey, we used to judge how good a farmer you were by how many farm magazines you had sitting on the coffee table, right? And I had taken two with me. And the first one talks about your energy food nexus, right? Farmers are talking about food. This is Progressive Farmer here. And the second one was about a farmer, the Farm Journal, talking about a farmer that had gone all electric, bought a Tesla. He was pulling it, you know, pulling his fertilizer tote there with his Tesla, and he has, you know, solar panels at the farm. So, you know, the message is getting out. I think the most important part of all of you being here and seeing all of the information that Dan was able to present is that agrivoltaics are real. They are happening. You're seeing it on a smaller scale in a lot of places. You know, my first thought is, how the heck are we going to do 1,500 acres? Or in the case of one of our projects, 6,000 acres. You know, that's a lot of tomatoes, right? That's a lot of lettuce. And so what Savillon is doing is we partnered with the Ohio State University because Extension had an idea that, hey, hay, alfalfa, some of the forage crops, soybeans, potentially corn, will all be something that we need to generate through agrivoltaics, and we need to figure out if that's going to work as well. As a farmer, heck yeah, it's going to work. It's going to grow, right? You see the grass in the ground. You know that it's going to grow. You just have to figure out how to get access to the sites. You have to figure out, you know, utility scale solar isn't thinking they're going to want a farmer out there farming between their panels. So what we're working on at Savillon, and my position specifically, is to figure out the liabilities, the insurance, the legalities, the things that come into play to contract with local farmers and allow them to be that person that comes out now and starts farming the solar site. We can modify it for regions. We can say, well, they're growing, you know, something here that they're not growing in Ohio, or, you know, Arizona is very different than, and you're seeing around the world the research that's being done. I just got back from Israel, and, you know, they're using utility scale solar as a solution for climate change, for the direct heat that's burning the plants up, and they want to find a way to shelter the plants and give that shade that Dan was talking about. So, it really is a solution moving forward. It's a smarter solution that we all here on this call are probably thinking, why didn't we start with this a long time ago? But where you all come in is the policy, the conversation, the education. We need to make sure this message gets out. We need to stop, worrying about farmland out of production and realizing that, hey, with just 0.5% of the country's acres, we could power the entire country on renewable energy. How cool is that? And so those are things that I'm teaching my dad, or actually my dad's teaching me. He was the first one to get solar on his house. And I think he had his deposit in for the Cybertruck, right? Like he wants to go Tesla. He's one of those guys, but the farmers are ready to figure out solutions. They're ready to try things on these sites. And what we need to do with our fellow industry people, the developers, the construction guys, is to teach them how to think like a farmer. They need to be realizing that, hey, if we do this to the ground, it might not be able to grow a crop later. So we need to do it a different way. We need trackers that chase the sun, and they can make it so that the resource is better. Because it's all going to come down to economics and yield equals economics as well. So we have to turn that back into it making sense, which from the numbers Dan shows, it pretty much does already. We just have to make sure everybody knows about it. Policy works with it. Permits are allowed to be given. That's something they're struggling with in Israel right now. The permitting process is just too stringent. So they're not able to get enough solar panels up on the crops to protect them in time. So I think that we could probably talk about utility scale solar and the benefits that it brings to the community. I could talk about farming all day long, but I'd like to hear, your questions. I'd like to hear some of Tony's thoughts on it. And I want to open up, the field so you can ping Dan. He's a genius when it comes to a lot of this stuff. So I think working together and finding solutions is the biggest part of what our job is right now in agrivoltaics. Thank you, Tony.
There's actually a couple of questions about sizing. Can you in urban agrivoltaics and urban farming, or on your own land, if you have a ground mounted solar array instead of on your roof, could it be combined with your vegetable garden kind of thing?
Yep, absolutely. And there's a lot of examples of those you can find. They've gone mainstream in Japan. A lot of universities, I went to the University of Illinois, we've got a great project, Scapes. It's kind of doing a garden patch of corn and beans, but nothing like Savion's project there next to the Ohio State University, going big, going to scale, which I think, we're going to need soon too. So, but for hobbyists and even urban areas, urban gardens, anywhere that you need shade, it's going to work.
Yeah. And Sarah, in Ohio, kind of the rubber meets the road for these commercial utility scale type projects at the Ohio Power Siting Board. And you have successfully had projects approved by the Power Siting Board. And although many people on the call understand that might be shifting to county boards of commission in the future, but can you talk a little bit about your projects of the Madison's Field and the Oak Run project, and tell us what Savion takes into consideration when they're developing a solar project to help preserve the rural character and the ag economy in the local community.
Right. Well, so first off, definitely shout out to the Power Siting Board. I always say that I love working in Ohio and I hate working in Ohio because we have one of the most stringent permitting processes in the country. The Power Siting Board is so thorough. They require so much upfront in order to permit a project. So really our state is thinking ahead of how we're taking care of the land, right? And so any developer that comes into Ohio needs to be aware of the fact, or if they're doing something, I guess, bigger than 50 megawatts, right? Or they need to be aware of the fact that eyes of the state are on them, that you need to do it right, or else we're going to come and we're going to get you, right? Like, so the staff does a really good job at that. And, you know, in these preparing these applications, there's so many studies that you go through to make sure that you're environmentally friendly, that you're not, you know, damaging things. And we're all learning. I think that the conversation and the research is important all the time. What Savion, you know, Madison Fields, one of the projects you mentioned, we are pretty far through construction. Actually, panels are up now, and it's supposed to start delivering energy at the end of the year. That's the project that we're doing the grant with Ohio State. So we have a between the rows research zone where we'll be doing hay and alfalfa. We've got a DOE grant to work on that. So over the next 4 years, you'll see research and white papers come out of that. And the information that Ohio State is going to collect on soil health, on yields. We're looking at precision ag equipment. We're actually going to be looking at grazing. People will make the comment a lot of time, even the slide that Dan showed had a lot of sheep on it, right? And so people are going to, you know, they're thinking, oh my gosh, 1,200 acres, that's way too many sheep. How are we going to find that many sheep? And so the concept of putting forage on the site actually combines haying and grazing to increase biodiversity, but also to make sure you don't need so many sheep, right? Like they can go in and clean it up afterwards after you harvest your hay crop. There's shag, there's all kinds of stuff. Got tons of pictures I can share if people want to connect offline. But at Oak Run, which is right now awaiting its permit, it's been through most of the process. Oak Run, we are committed to doing at least 2,000 acres on that. It's 5,700 acres, committed to at least 2,000 acres. I'll tell you, we'll probably expand that up. The same with Madison Fields. It's a 1,200 acre site right now. Engineering wise, there's complications to the traditional way that things are being done. There's cable that goes across your east-west alleyways. So we're burying that in the section that Ohio State is researching so that they can drive all the way through the alley to farm. However, talking to Kubota, who is also a partner on the project, is that, well, we think we've got equipment now that can go under that, right? So we can farm the whole site. So what Savion did starting out was we made the whole site, it's hayable. The array mix that we went with is hayable. We actually worked with the Darby Creek Association. Shout out to Anthony Sasson. He's on the call to talk about mixes that make sense so that we're not contaminating the native species that's there. And, you know, are we far enough away? Are there things they don't want to plant? And that conversation is ongoing of which pollinators make sense, which hays make sense, which grasses make sense. And so that's part of what Savion does, is talk to the community, get people's input, figure out what to do. And then on Oak Run, we would like to build it in a way that we add a bunch of these technologies that Dan showed you, so that we can start figuring out as an industry. And I saw the questions in the chat, you know, how do we get the best resource? Do we use vertical panels? Do we use transparent panels? Do we raise them up? Hey, that costs more money in steel, right? Or do we space the rows out? Right now we're seeing spacing in Ohio doesn't require that. I've got 17-foot spacing at Madison Field, leading edge to trailing edge. It's easy to get a piece of equipment down through there. You know, I can fit the stuff I have, some of the smaller stuff I have in the barn, you know, down through those aisles now. But when you're talking to Kubota and John Deere and they see how much this makes sense, they're talking about smaller equipment anyway, right? Soil compaction is an issue. We're getting bigger and bigger and more corporate. And gosh, you can get a tractor now that costs $1 million, Tony, $1 million. That's crazy, right? So you can get something smaller. And if that's going to work for farmers everywhere and also on agrivoltaic sites, it's a win-win, right? So that's what we're looking at. That's what we're trying to bring together. I love seeing all these people on the slides that are working on this. It's just such a collaboration. The Solar Farm Summit was amazing. Met Joe Sharp up there. He's on the call. I see him talking, you know, like everyone's passionate about this and they really want to find a solution of how are we going to create clean energy and feed the world come 2050, right? Like, and that's the challenge. Yeah. So it's the perspective of positivity of we can find a solution, not I don't want to look at it or I don't want to try.
Yeah. So would you say, considering the Ohio Power Siting Board is a agrivoltaics component of the project, a plus, a positive, or negative, or neutral driver for obtaining approval?
For us, it's been helpful. It's been a positive. I would say that the Power Siting Board is listening to the community. They're hearing the farmers, and they're educating as well. So I think, you know, as more and more farmers see the value, I mean, you're seeing that production yield, that increase, 160%, 180% of what you can get off the land. What farmer doesn't want to produce or make twice, you know, the income of his property? So it really is a no-brainer, you know, and that's where it's an exciting place to be, right? You're going to see it grow. We see articles, 9.3 billion, you know, over the next year's 10.1% growth in the arena of agrivoltaics. I mean, you got it, Tony, right? You got Agrivoltaics Inc., right? Let's do this. So, yeah.
Well, let me ask you to put your farmer hat on for a second, as opposed to your Savon. But from the standpoint of a farmer or a landowner who's considering a solar lease, what can the farmer or landowner do to encourage a strong agrivoltaics component to the project, and when and how do they nail that down?
So during the contract time, definitely. So, and I know Ohio State Extension goes out and meets, you know, in Ohio with the farmers. Talk to your developers. Let them know, hey, I'm interested in this. What can we do more with the project? Or ask, are you doing agrivoltaics? Are you considering pollinators? Are you considering X, you know, grazing, different things? So that's one big thing. Let's get it into our contracts up front, because contracts are big, right? But I would say, secondly, keeping that open mind. I talked about this at the Solar Farm Summit. The entrepreneurship, the idea, every farmer's got a side hustle, right? There's ways to make money off of utility scale solar. You come up with a concept, you come up with an idea, you want to help, you want to be a part of it, there's probably a place for you. So that's, I mean, again, it's the positivity, it's the attitude of how do I help? And a lot of farmers are already there. That's what we're built for. So unless you're my dad and I'm trying to get you to change our you know, seed corn wrapper.
I
love the fact.
Well, I love the fact that the chat is just like exploding, and not just with questions, but sharing information. And that's something that I hope these forums are good for. There's one that I laughed about. Well, somebody asked about goats, but I heard goats aren't good for.
Don't say that. Don't say that. We had a gentleman at the Solar Farm Summit who said goats will work. You can see, you know, a Jack Solar Garden, actually Byron says, you know, hey, raise the panels a little bit so we can get cattle to graze, right? Well, I've been told sheep will jump the same as goats, right? They get feisty too. So I don't think we should rule out goats. I think it's a myth. I think we can work with goats. I actually bought some Cooney pigs. So they're pigs from New Zealand that don't root. So they're grazing pigs. We could graze pigs in the site. So that's just where, like, I don't rule anything out, Jane. It's all a possibility.
Well, thank you, because I had heard that we don't want to give goats a bad rap.
I would love to refer everyone to the American Solar Grazing Association. Go to their website. They have tremendous, everything you want to know about solar grazing, from Cooney pigs to goats. And maybe the angry goats will eat the cables. There are some gentle goats out there. And if we build for goats, maybe it'll be easier. But yeah, American Solar Grazing Association, ASGA, incredible resources.
Thanks.
Yeah. Go ahead, Tony.
I was just going to say, do you want to read off any of the questions in the chat?
Yeah, I'm going through them here. Are there, and this is a good question, because obviously all of this is very political, and you often hear the arguments against solar that it is taking land out of agricultural production. This clearly is a response to that. And do you see it making a difference in the opposition?
Well, I'll defer to Dan about the bipartisan bill that's coming out if we're going to talk about politics, right? Dan, you want to mention? We got both sides of the aisle helping out with this.
We did. Thanks, Sarah. We just a couple Fridays ago, the very first agrivoltaics bill introduced into the U.S. Senate happened on a bipartisan basis. Senators Heinrich, a Democrat from New Mexico, Senator Braun, a Republican from Indiana, introduced a bill. And the timing and like how who those guys are, the chairman of this and that, hopefully we'll get it into the farm bill. Maybe not this year, but maybe next year. Farm bill's coming due, I think, end of September. So starting out on a bipartisan basis is very hopeful for agrivoltaics, kind of like brownfields. You know, everybody kind of agrees. You see the compelling value proposition, and brownfields always sailed through 99-0. And there's just not a lot to dislike about agrivoltaics, whether it's the economics, the jobs in rural America, putting people to work again. We're going to need a lot more vets. We're going to need a lot more shepherds. There's not enough sheep. So it's a growth industry, and who doesn't love that?
Yeah, and I would say it really is not a response to farmland out of production. I mean, you can see it dates back to 82 where they started doing it. It's an answer to the food fuel nexus concept of we need to produce energy and we need to produce food. And so I think agrivoltaics is just catching up with utility scale solar. I mean, it boomed so quickly. And it, you know, as you saw the pricing come down, what Dan showed on his slides, they just wanted to get modules in the ground. They wanted to get them built, right? We needed to start producing renewable energy. And now they're seeing the solution there. It's not a response to the opposition. Is it helping with the opposition? I guess I would ask the person who's opposing if what their real beef is, I guess, and that's what it will go back to, is that conversation, Jane, is like, do they really just not like it, or do they really believe in, farmland? So that's a tricky question, right? Like, because sometimes people just want to complain. So I don't know. Just
going to the bottom line, it has saved projects already. There was a Guzman Energy project in Colorado that got killed. They changed the management plan to bring on grazers, and I think they did some wildflowers in the buffers, and then the county approved it, rescued it from the dead.
Well, it's an important issue to grapple with, because here in Ohio, we've had, I believe, 8 counties at the county commissioner level who have basically ruled utility scale solar off limits in the county. And that's not specific to somebody coming with them with an application. They just say, we don't want any part of it. And I think it will take a lot of stories and a lot of personal narratives of how projects like this with agrivoltaics have not only allowed for solar, rational solar development in a county, but have enhanced soils and provided the sort of benefits that we've all talked about in today's webinar.
Thanks, Tony. Sarah, can I ask you a question? Because we mentioned bipartisan. It's across the states. I went around the world, but one of the other pieces is the public-private partnership. I think the educational opportunities, we see all the land-grant universities, Oregon, Rutgers, Minnesota, Illinois, but the OSU, I love what Savion's doing, like going big with this first project in America right there with one of the historic land-grant universities. Can you just tell us more about that?
Well, what I'll say is you're right. So PJM, Ohio Agriculture, we're really in the heart of it all to have this big project, right? So we're next to the Molly Caron Institute, where they do farm science review. We've got that 5,700 acre site there as we're pursuing this permit, and hopefully going to be able, to build probably starting 2025. I think the answer is putting a lot of these questions that you all are asking into display, and having, the United States lead the way and doing what Fraunhofer is doing, or doing what they're doing in Israel and China, and trying it out, because it comes back to convincing the developers and the owners that it's not going to hurt your panels. It's not going to hurt your resource. It's actually going to make everybody better. And, rising tides, everybody does, better in that. And I Madison Fields is only 180 megawatts, 1,200 acres, but we're gonna try out, see what works there to be able to inform Oak Run, 5,700 acres, 800 megawatts, 300 megawatts of storage. You know, and what Savion is doing is looking at using it in all of our projects as far as, you know, does agrivoltaics work? If it does, what can we do to incorporate it everywhere? So I'm hoping that the rest of the industry gets that message.
You know, you always think about the most, excuse me, most powerful interest group being the Farm Bureau. Excuse me. Where's the Farm Bureau on this?
Yeah, Tony, USDA.
Well, I'm a Farm Bureau member, but not a decision maker. Dale Arnold, though, I think has been supportive of it. Dale is their energy advisor, director, and I think also a member of the Green Energy Ohio board.
He was. He's not
okay.
any longer.
But that tells you a lot. So I think they're at least supportive of it. But the other agricultural groups are really throwing in with it, and I think Farm Bureau will eventually probably put a plank in their policy, probably maybe even in this October meeting, in support of it, because there's you know, nobody's putting a gun to your head to make you develop your farm ground into solar, but if you do decide to do so, and you know, many farms are getting into succession issues, and as Sarah indicated, so the average age of a farmer is something like 58 years old, and so this is a good way of retiring, if for no other reason, to have an income stream and still be supporting the renewable energy in the United States.
Yeah, and I think the question, there were a couple of questions about who the political champions were in Ohio and lobbying groups, and that's why I raised it, because you know, there's always strength in numbers, and you need others to stand with those who are on the cutting edge, like Savion, and I just think it's really important that we make sure that everybody is aware of what is being done and what the potential is. And I know Dan has said to me in previous conversations, and Sarah agreed, that Ohio could be, you know, at the head of the class on agrivoltaics. And
it breaks my heart as an Illini to see the Buckeye State poised to break out here. But I not that I'm going to whisper negatively in the power board's ear, but yeah, they'll jump to the lead. It's a really big deal, and it recaptures and kind of revitalizes the entire legacy of all the Big Ten land-grant universities. And the future is going to change. I know we're getting close on time. I have bonus time, but I want to leave with one last thought from me, maybe, is that ethanol is about 40% of the corn crop every year, maybe 35%. That's tens and tens of millions of acres. And with the electrification of everything, not just Elon anymore, the Ford F-150 is going electric. The corn markets could change. It can't all go beans. So we're going to have to diversify pretty soon. And young people kind of understand that. And they're going to be getting a lot of this land, you know, one way or the other. As Mark Twain famously said, sometimes we do mark progress at every funeral.
Right.
Yeah, and it ties nicely into the local food movement, that we want to eat food that is grown closer to where we live. And there's one that Tony might be able to answer. Does the Ohio Department of Agriculture allow solar development on their easements?
I would kind of doubt that they do, because I know some of the other land trusts that operate throughout the country usually prohibit solar, or they consider that taking it out of agricultural use. Now, those could be, I mean, as the history of agrivoltaics vaults into the future, that may change. But right now, the easement issues for not just the Ohio Department of Agriculture, but other privately funded easements makes solar a no-go on those. And there might be a procedure, though, for getting exceptions, but nothing that exists in the law today.
And we are at 1 o'clock. I know some people have to leave, and we respect that. We can stay a few minutes for those who want. I will go back and try to go through all these questions and make sure that there is a way to get some answers. But as I said, what I really loved is the conversations between participants, because that's great fun. Sarah and Dan brought so much expertise to this. We could have gone on all afternoon, and maybe we need to do another one.
I almost did. Sorry about that. I got too carried away. I really was only missing the resources slide. There's a couple slides at the end just with links and references to other places, and we will make those available.
Yes, that would be great. And at some point, we all need to get out on the land and see this in practice. I think that would be a really nice follow-up to be able to see what's happening and to see how successful it is. We will follow the Oak Run project and the Madison Fields project carefully. Tony, thank you for your being moderator with all of your experience.
And if I could mention too, sure, before people log off, if you enjoyed this presentation today and found it useful, please consider becoming a friend of Green Energy Ohio. And I believe Jane has a link in the chat, or you can go through our website at greenenergyohio.org, I believe.
Yes, we have a new program called Friends of Geo. It's like those of you who listen to NPR, it's a very similar kind of a thing. And we do want, I mean, this has told me that there's, a lot of interest out there in topics like this. And Bob McAllister is on our call today. He is on the board of directors. He is the program chair. And so as we are putting together programs, we want programs that attract the numbers of people that this program did. And I would, anyone who wants to send us an idea, I would love to hear it. And we will continue to, we started these online conversations during the pandemic, but we keep it up because it's a way to reach everyone across the state, which is GEO's mission. We are a statewide organization. And so I really encourage all of you to think about what you would like to hear from us. We are here to serve those folks who support us, and we'd like to know.
I'd like to respond.
Oh, okay, Lee.
Someone said, will agrivoltaics convince people who have been naysayers? Will it change their mind? And I'd like to ask whether the people who were motivated to change the renewable fuel standard from 10% to 15%, whether that 7 million acres is taking food out of people's mouths or not. And I'd like to see a correlation between how agrivoltaics can solve that problem and how the 5% increase in the renewable fuel standard will solve the problem. I think that some of the people who advocated for the 15% are not convincible. Thank you.
Good question, Lee. I would just point out, sometimes people accuse me of forecasting the future. I really don't. But I can think, looking around the corner, ethanol may go away no matter what Washington does. We can leave. They don't have to make a policy change to the electrification of everything. The market's just going to take the internal combustion engine away. Gasoline demand is peaking or has peaked. And the mandate could exist, and we're just going to need a lot less biofuels, and refineries are going to go out of business. And this is the boom and bust of the Great American Cycle. And I expect nothing less this time. In fact, just to underscore something I said, and I'm glad for bonus time. I can't stick around if there are other questions. Or Jane can give me the hook again.
No.
But we need to start preparing for success. And I'm really glad America is getting the message, corporate, public, private, because if ethanol goes away, tens of millions, we're just going to need, we need a land use renaissance. And thankfully, it looks like we're about to onboard one.
And I would say that in response to Lee's comment that as a farmer, and I am a farmer, I'm thrilled that either way, it's going to involve agriculture, whether it's growing corn for ethanol and other more advanced biofuels, or using our land through agrivoltaics to generate clean electricity. It's all going to happen in the rural regions, and it's going to either be a great benefit to farmers, or at least something that keeps the next generation on the farms, and that continues to generate excitement in rural areas.
And I wanted to reach out. Julie had asked a question that seemed like it was a little bit time critical. She has county commissioners who are thinking about banning solar. And I guess what I would say is county commissioners can always change their mind. They can pass a resolution one day and they can change their mind the next. I would encourage them not to ban it countywide, because that's a signal to developers that they're not interested in even talking about it. And so you have that ban out there and the developer is going to think, ooh, we're going to avoid that county with a 10-foot pole. You're going to lose, community benefits and even opportunities to even think about these community benefits for tax revenue, for agrivoltaics, for entrepreneurship. Tony was USDA. We can talk about changing the lamb market in the United States. We import 60% of our lamb from Australia, guys. Come on, we could start something here where we make that independence motto much bigger, right? I would encourage your county commissioner is that you got to keep open minds to possibilities. You don't tell manufacturing, we don't want you here. You don't tell people we don't want you here. You let them come to the table and sit down and talk about what your county wants to see. And if it makes sense, you approve the project. If it doesn't, tell them to take a hike. That's kind of how it works. So I wouldn't do a preemptive ban, but I understand there's, people that ask for things when you're a commissioner. So that's what I got, Julie. Hope it helps.
If I can build on that, I think, unfortunately, solar has gotten caught, like a lot of things, in the culture war. But agrivoltaics has to be carved out as an exception, like a lot of other countries have done. In Italy, they just passed a great agrivoltaics law. In France, now if you want to do solar, you have to do agrivoltaics going forward, because the value add is so profound, because it does so many things. So it's so awesome. Forget about the renewable electrons. We would do this anyway, certainly in dry lands, even if it didn't produce electricity. If we would just build open air greenhouses to save farming, like if we had enough money, we'd probably be doing it right now in sub-Saharan Africa and elsewhere. So this is shade that pays, and there's nobody anywhere that should stand in the way of that.
I agree. I think we all agree. What's the next step? What if I were to say to both of you and Tony, what's the next step in making this happen in Ohio and elsewhere, but particularly in Ohio?
Well, I'll say, I don't work for Savion, but Savion's big project with the OSU would really help. We'd have to figure out how to do it at scale in the United States. That's the scale of our land use opportunities. That's the type of cropland production that we're doing. That's what our guys know how to do. But we don't quite have the rule book yet. So we need to partner up. History rhymes, and here the land grant universities and private industry go again. We need that to happen. And that if we can overcome, I think, as hopefully I made the case, the kind of the technology's there, even these first generation projects pencil, but it's the educational piece. We have to figure out how to work together, the public and private sector, and policy will help there. But all the young farmers, we need the universities to start plugging people in, and we really do need to train a new generation of people to work in rural lands, fancy ranch hands, digital ranch hands, and probably mobile vets and mobile slaughter. Sarah's right. We don't have enough sheep. I was at the meeting of the Indiana Sheep Association a few weeks ago, but around since 1873. They had their first solar grazing meeting, and a gentleman from ASGA was there, the American Solar Grazing Association, and he gave me an incredible fact. Rounding quickly, if we take all the sheep in America right now, they could only graze 1% of the solar farms that are already built in just New York. So there's not enough sheep. One of another big solar developer, Silicon Ranch, I think they have their own breeding program now. Sheep prices have already moved. And whether we eat them or whether we use them for their materials, because they say that they're so much more cost effective versus lawnmowers, we're probably going to have a big herd of sheep 20, 30 years, Tony, to get back to your question about looking to the future. We're going to have more sheep than we can eat, but they're still going to pay for themselves just by the way that they eat. It's almost like one night over beers, we were kicking around the future. You know, we used to have tens and tens of millions of bison in this country roaming the plains, and we kind of put all that land into agricultural use. And Byron Komanek out at Jack Solar Garden is right. Figure out how to repurpose that. We're going to have, you know, equal size herds. Well, we already do, but bring them back into symbiosis with Mother Nature and get that cycle, that virtuous cycle working again.
Yeah. And I think it's imperative that we all get on board with this new agrivoltaics bill that's been introduced in the Congress. And I think the pathway of getting it folded into the 5-year farm bill, which is due at the end of this year, makes a lot of sense. And it, like so many other issues, if we can navigate the waters to get that through, then we can start working in our own local and state legislatures to get similar protections at the local level.
So, and I'll say
yes,
internally to Savion, you know, my role as the director of farming operations in agrivoltaics is a big one for utility scale solar in general, and us taking this step. I mean, Savion was purchased by Shell, and you know, so it's global, right? Like you get, that's a big deal. There's 36.5 gigawatts in our pipeline, you know, and I think I will tell you, I hate being here and like spending time talking and being on meetings all the time, because, you know, I'm used to being out in the field and working on the sites, the ideas of the tours and stuff, and get people out to show them. It's essential, right? Taking time to talk about this. So now we have all of you talking about it, is important. And, you know, the Solar Farm Summit, attending these meetings that we're talking about and getting the message out so that we can all become the experts about it and share the message and keep doing that allows Dan and I to get our work done behind the scenes with moving bills and changing, you know, insurance and liability forms and contracts within Savion. And so I know y'all are going to email and want us to, you know, have calls and talk about stuff and show pictures. Dan, I got kicked off of a presentation because I showed too many pictures last time, so that's why I didn't do it this time. But like we have to get out there and get stuff done, right? Like get steel in the ground, get research. That's where Ohio State comes into play, and all of these institutions is we got to get it on paper so it's believable and you can reproduce it and show it to the people. So that's the next step, is just doing the work and getting shit done, right? Like, let's get out there and let's just all work at it and stop fighting each other or banging our heads against the wall. Let's go out and move. And
I'd like to add that one of the county commissioners who is on a call today suggested a presentation at the County Commissioners Association meeting.
Absolutely.
For all county, you know, let's start taking this show on the road. I mean, I think, because, I mean, that's, GEO's purpose is education. At the heart of it, that is what we do. We advocate, we educate, we reach out, and we work with other organizations, the County Commissioners Association of Ohio, the Township Trustees Association, there, you know, people, and maybe you've done that already. Maybe that has already happened. But if not, and even if it has, I think we need to continue to do that, because that is what education is all about.
Agreed. Those are good suggestions.
Someone asked about the bill number of the federal bill, and then I think someone else maybe put the link in. So,
Jane and Tony, can I ask a question to Dan and Sarah about the Oak Run project?
Sure.
My moniker on screen is Zuriel, I'm actually borrowing somebody's computer because I'm in a remote location. I've been in contact with Dan. My name is Gary Hauser. I just had a commentary published in the Ohio Capital Journal just yesterday.
Yes, very, very insightful.
Not only on agrivoltaics in general, but also kind of honing in on this unique opportunity with Oak Run here in Ohio. But my question to Dan and Sarah is that I've actually taken the time, I've read the entire Oak Run proposal. It's very well put together, but it's also extremely lengthy. And I just wonder, do you have a sense of whether this really key point is fully being gotten across to the Ohio Power Siting Board, that this approval of Oak Run has the potential to place Ohio at the very leading edge of this cutting edge issue here in the United States? Is the Ohio Power Siting Board fully aware of the significance of putting Ohio at the forefront on this?
I hope so. I think that with work like what you've done and what Dan's doing, the message is getting out.
We hope so as well. That's why we posted up along on the road at one of the boards, and I certainly made that case, you know, in front of the power board. And again, being biased as a diehard Illini guy, if I had to pick one project to approve, it'd be this one. Because of the educational opportunities, we really need to make this happen. Kind of back to one of Jane's questions, like what needs to happen? We need the universities to figure out how to make this just the normal course of agribusiness going forward.
And maybe add to that the ag technical schools and the community colleges around the state. What a great opportunity to train a new generation of young people who will decide to stay in Ohio instead of past generations, which get frustrated and
oh yeah, it's the future of farming. It's sure. The future of farming. So
as well as the historically Black colleges and universities, I think Absolutely. That's important. I believe there's someone on the call who works with them and who, yes, there we go. And in Africa as well, as I recall from our conversation. So there is great opportunity to share this knowledge and this technology.
Well, right. And bring them to the Solar Farm Summit. You know, get them up there if they're skeptical and they want to see what we're doing or what, you know, everyone's doing. And I guess, you know, as speaking engagements come up, that's the way people learn. So let Jane know about it. Let Tony, let Dan, let us know about it. And we'll try to, Dan told me the other day, he's running, you know, 100 miles a minute all the time and he's not tired yet. So let's sign him up for more.
Well, and Rotaries. I mean, there are so many, you know, Rotary clubs and church groups. There are so many opportunities to talk to people, and especially people in the farming communities in the rural areas. Dan, why don't tell us a little bit about Solar Farm Summit?
Oh, there's not much to say. It's North America's Agrivoltaics Expo. We did sell out. We're going to go bigger on the expo next year. It'll be in Chicago again, Chicagoland, right by O'Hare, so easy to fly to, but also kind of easy to drive to, not downtown, and right in the middle. And yeah, you got to wait till next year, but watch for agrivoltaics on the agendas of a lot of typical solar conferences. This is going mainstream really fast. Talk to your friends, tell them about the opportunity. Get out of the puppies and the pony mills and start raising sheep and cooney pigs. But get on YouTube as well. There's a lot of slick videos that have been done, very shareable. Check out Jack's Solar Garden. They've got some little promo videos you can find. Just Google, get on YouTube, agrivoltaics. Start sharing this stuff around.
They do tours too. If you can go to Colorado, Jack's he'll do tours.
Yeah, but seeing is believing, as Sarah said, that's Missouri's motto, right? Show me. You can do it. And tinkering, you know, that is what farmers do. We hack out solutions, and this stuff really at a small scale, you can just start messing around. Now panels are getting cheap enough again. Oh, and something I should have mentioned during regular time, but the USDA, they were at the Solar Farm Summit, but they've got these REAP grants that are available in record bounty. And there are ways for farmers to leverage all the muscle and might and financing capability of USDA to get this stuff paid for on their farms. And so definitely be checking that out and watch for more from USDA. That bill number is 1778, Senate Bill 1778, Agrivoltaics Research and Demonstration Act of 2023. It's just a little bit of money, and it tasks USDA to do all kinds of things, which is why I hope it gets into the Farm Bill. Call your congressman, call your senator, and tell them to vote for Senate Bill 1778. Again, I'm super pleased that we've started out on this strong bipartisan footing, and I think we're gonna stick there.
Someone in the comments mentioned the electric co-ops, and of course the rural co-ops. I'm on a co-op out here in Licking County, and they are very, they're different from the investor-owned utilities because they are not under the regulation of the Public Utilities Commission. And our co-op has, and several others, have solar arrays that you can buy into, essentially community solar, which is on the agenda for the Ohio General Assembly right now. And so that's another opportunity. You know, these usually aren't very big arrays, certainly. I know ours in Licking County isn't, but that's another avenue of conversation.
Sure. USDA has also got very attractive loans and grants for rural electric co-ops that are under the new IRA funds that have to be put in the field within the next 16, 18 months. So there are a lot of opportunities for rural co-ops if they're willing to get renewable energy, expand their renewable energy portfolio.
I think that community solar bill in Ohio was introduced by a Republican too, Jane. Is that
Yes,
right?
yes,
Yeah.
it is. It's a bipartisan bill. It has both Republican sponsors and Democratic co-sponsors. And it had its first hearing yesterday for sponsor testimony. It will not be heard again until after the summer break. So in September, if you're interested in community solar, we are working, Green Energy Ohio is working on this bill along with Solar United Neighbors and the Community Solar Association. That's not quite the right acronym, but the national one. It is something that Ohio needs to have to diversify. You know, we love our utility scale solar and residential, but community solar is yet another opportunity that we don't have right now in most of Ohio.
And I don't know what number were we up to on this call? I know there's like 30 people still left, but Green Energy Ohio, your voice matters. Call, write a letter, join a website, like grassroots, like people on the ground, numbers matter. So get involved, be in tune with what's happening on these bills. When we need to talk to our legislators, call them and tell them what you think and how excited you are about these ideas. So you can't sit silent. You got to act. It's the resistance, right, Dan? We're getting out there. The revolution.
The Renaissance. Yeah.
The Renaissance. That's right.
It's not a golden age. It's a platinum age. I mean, if we can really feed the next 3, 4, 5 billion mouths, if we can double the harvest, double the rent, restore the prairie, save farming and dryland environments with climate change coming out, with desertification starting to eat, regions all over the world. I mean, this has got to be the algorithm to solve for abundance. I really believe that. But now it is a fragile time. That's why I'm just taking naps. If you guys get tired, just remember I'm out here. But I do need your help. I'm only one person. I've got a great small team. But the politicians are listening, but you have to have your voice heard. And there's plenty of people still who are just pretty confused about solar. And I mean, some of them, their hearts are in the right place. Some of these first generation solar projects, they didn't really treat the land very well. And stormwater is an issue. It creates runoff sometimes. That is happening too. But we have the solutions now to level up, as you saw in my primer at the top of the call. But the faster it happens, the quicker we're going to seize this opportunity and take some of the risk off the table. But I hope we all leave the call today thinking about the opportunity, the real business opportunity. The economics work right now. I think there's a lot of farms that can start to implement a lot of these things right now. Start tinkering, and panels are only going to get cheaper. So yeah, the future is very bright.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, one of my favorite stories that I tell a lot, and some of you who've been around me may have heard it. We took a reporter from the Cleveland Plain Dealer up to the Blue Creek Wind Farm several years ago, before COVID. And the reporter asked the landowner why he did it. And the landowner said, "Do you have a 401k?" And the reporter said, "Well, yeah." And he said, "I don't have a 401k. My land, I want it to stay in my family. I want it to stay in production to the extent possible. And this is a way to do that." And that, taking that the next step further with agrivoltaics and solar, it is an incredibly important opportunity for the agricultural community. We want our farmers, we want our landowners to be on their land and produce. And at the same time, we want to see a diversification of energy sources, and we want to see climate change addressed. And when you have a technology like agrivoltaics that does it all, it would be ridiculous not to pursue it. It is really something very special. Tony, would you like to say any final words, or Dan or Sarah? Because it's 1:30 and I love the fact that people stayed on, but I think maybe everybody needs to go about their day.
Well, why not? Let's thank Dan and Sarah again, and to all the participants. Let's give them a big virtual round of applause for the great presentations that you both provided. And we can tell with the two of you that your profession is also your passion.
Yes.
And as Dan would say, we have a bright solar-powered future before us. Thank you so much for your participation today, and thank you, Jane, for putting it all together.
You're very welcome, and we will follow up on this because there's clearly interest. This is not the last you will hear of agrivoltaics from Green Energy Ohio, for sure.
Right.
So thank you.
Okay. All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.